Good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Doug Brudke. I am the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. We're very fortunate today to have Rutherford Pascal here again, a second visit and an ongoing conversation about leadership. Rutherford is an expert on that. His company, Glass Walls, is John Maxwell inspired support, coaching, and consulting. And it's also driven off of decades of top executive leadership experience that Rutherford has had, including in big pharma. His background is just exemplary. And so when he finished those career reaching at the top of the executive level, he was impassioned to help others get to the next level. He's been inspired by John Maxwell, just like I have, or at least we've both been inspired. I think he was so inspired, he created a practice built around the ideas of John Maxwell. I've just read about a dozen of his books and just been really impressed with his whole approach to leadership. Rutherford's just taken it to some amazing level. So we're going to be speaking with Rutherford today, and the format will be that I'll be asking him some questions. He'll be answering. And then as you have either ideas or further questions, please either raise your hand or unmute yourself. It's probably better to raise your hand just for so we can make sure that we get to you. And we'll be monitoring that in the chat area. Rutherford, did I say anything wrong, or is there anything else that you would like to add? Perhaps maybe you could just spend a moment and tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to get to this point and how you help people.
Oh, okay. So by the way, and Doug, you have another 80 books to go. You've only written a dozen. John Maxwell has some more,
90 books.
some more,
Amazing.
some more to go. Um, so what inspired me to do this was, as you said, I spent 30 plus years in pharmaceutical leadership with three Fortune 100 companies, really just growing people, growing leadership, seeing great leaders and seeing not so great leaders, being involved with both those and in every situation. So, what my passion is helping people be great leaders, helping people grow, because when great leadership happens, great things happen to the organizations, to the culture, to things like that. So that's what I'm inspired by. When I talk to people like Michael Quigley, I see Charles Bernard's on the call, great people, great leadership. That inspires me to get better, to grow, to continue to help people be excellent at leadership and really inspire the next generation and to do great things. So it's really more about a passion for seeing people get better and grow and inspire others.
Fantastic. Uh, Today, we're really honored at Global Chamber because we have two leadership events. This one now with Rutherford, and then in a couple hours, we have one with Blaine Bartlett. Can't think of a better day, in terms of programming and getting our team, our global tribe, inspired and infused with tips and techniques to be more successful. So today's conversation is going to have quite a bit of global aspects to it in terms of leadership. So I'd like to kick off the conversation by asking Rutherford the question about methods of global strategy implementation. While you're doing global strategy, how does a leader incorporate local aspects? How do you adapt locally, both in the strategy development process and then in the implementation process?
It's a great question. So global strategy. So there's got to be a core strategy that you want implemented across. It's got to be some Great. So 80% of what you're thinking about, how you're planning on going forward, reaching the goals, whatever, that's got to be there. That's got to be there. So that's got to be the top end of it. So, and you build that through conversations with all the regions, all the nations that are in your charge, right? So the one thing to be clear, this is not done in a vacuum. This can't be just US centric and be successful, right? But 80% of it has to be, has to theoretically cover, I'll say the globe or everybody under your umbrella. So once you've figured that out and you've gotten input from everybody else in all the regions that are attached to you, then there's going to be local differences. So that I told you 80%'s got to come up from up front. The 20% that is left is there's going to be unique ways of working in those other areas. And that's the art, there's science and art. That's the art of this, right? Is making sure that there's still the umbrella, but how do you get that done? How do you get that done can be unique. If you think about this, right? The what and the why are intact, but the how can be adjusted because of local issues, because of local situations, because of local markets, because of local governments, right? So that's how I would think about that question and answer it.
I remember several circumstances that weren't necessarily global oriented, where in the implementation of something for the greater good, the different constituents within an organization would have to give a little bit. And the most pressing one that I can remember was an SAP implementation. DuPont had failed twice, and we were tasked to do a major one, the biggest one yet, and yet it was the third try, and it was going to have to be successful or not. It was across 8 businesses, and it was a global aspect, but it was really mainly different constituents and getting everybody aligned to see the greater good versus a change in their area that benefited the greater good was really tricky, and it took techniques and thoughts and leadership to be able to do that. Could you talk a little bit about maybe times that you've done things like that, or advice that you'd have for others to how to approach situations like that, where the different constituents will each have to give something for the greater good, and sometimes that's perceived as a loss by them, but good leadership overcomes that. How do you do that?
So when you go into situations like that, it's just so you have to come together and figure out what's the overall goal you're trying to achieve. What is that big goal? And everybody's going to have different ideas of how to get there, different situations. And then because of that, you're going to have to subjugate or lessen your view if it's not your way. You might get 30%, 70% of what you want, or 0%. But if it's for the greater good, then you have to do this. So I will tell you, I did something years ago that reminds me of this. So typically, as a sales lead, right, in the middle of the year, what you never want to do to salespeople is change their compensation. You do not want to change how they get incentivized. But we had a situation that happened that we were working on for a few years, and with the biggest customer we had. And the biggest customer we had signed a contract to go in completely with us. So that would change the life that would change our market share from like 20%, 22% to 68% in 2 months, right? What would that mean to the field would be that they would if just say they would typically double to triple the highest earning sales rep at the time would triple what they made from a bonus perspective. So for the greater good of the company, I had to change the payout curve so it would be tamped down. Now, by the way, everybody but one person made more money, but they didn't make the numbers that they were going to make, right? Because of that. And what what could have been like a catastrophic failure from a leadership perspective or from a rep's perspective, earning because of an understanding that everybody had to give a little bit for us to continue because we needed to continue from a fiscally responsible manner to make this happen. And everybody there was dissension, zero dissension. There was no water cooler talk. Because everybody understood the reason behind it, right? And so that's what you have to do in that situation is you always tell people the why and why, hey, listen, you're giving something up, but the 1 year, 5 year, 10 year benefits are so much greater than what you might lose in the short term.
Got it. So it sounds like there's communication,
Oh,
certainly, and understanding the situation and the dynamics and walking and talking through that.
Doug, I want to stress this so much. The why is so important. You understanding why we're making a decision, understanding how it's going to benefit the customer, the company is so important. And if it's a long-term decision, um, understand that you are going to dip at like this storming, norming, performing type of like the thing that when major change happens, that's what happens. Understand, hey, we might be in a way that we are going to dip for a quarter or two because of this decision, but we believe in it that so strongly that in 3 or 4 quarters we're not gonna only go back to where we were, we're gonna start going much further. You have to explain that to people in a really good way so they understand it because there's going to be tough times when you make decisions like this. Some of those decisions might end up looking really poor for a month, a quarter, 2 quarters, even a year or two. But you and your team completely understand that, then you can communicate with the entire leadership team, and they could communicate with their team, their customers if necessary, and everybody's on the same train, and they will succeed in the end. But communication, Doug, is paramount.
Thank you very much. We're talking to Rutherford Pascal of Glass Walls Leadership. We are going to be finishing up in about 35 minutes, and so we have a number of questions. Feel free to raise your hand and interject. Also, use the chat area to both post your information about what's going on and any questions that you might have. I'll start to look at the chat area in a few minutes and see if there's any questions there as well. I had a kind of I thought, somewhat amusing interchange. I think it was yesterday. I got a WhatsApp message from a member in Peru who had interacted with another member in another country. I'll just kind of call it in the Middle East, Central Asia region. And the Central Asia region person had joked to the Peru person in WhatsApp, basically saying once he found out he was a consultant, he was kind of making consulting jokes and consultant jokes. And so the person sending these to the person in Peru thought it would be funny. And we've all heard those jokes before about consultants. Yeah, and I've heard them and spoken, but I've not seen them in a WhatsApp. And the end result was the fellow in Peru was deeply insulted, and thought that he was being abused by this other person, and the other person was just being incredibly rude. They ended up disconnecting from each other, or the Peru guy disconnected from the other in LinkedIn, and then I got a message from him with all the text of what happened. And when I read the interchange, I said, "Well, that's a joke, but it's a bad joke, and it really shouldn't be done with someone that you've just met in WhatsApp. That's not cool." And so I took various steps to resolve the issue, and I won't get into that necessarily, but basically, I think both of them were, ultimately not very happy, because the fellow in Peru kind of felt like this other guy should be thrown off the earth. And the other guy didn't understand why this guy was so sensitive to something that would be. So the question really is, what approaches do you have to resolve conflict when team members have culturally different perspectives on confrontation, on harmony, or just communication?
Yeah, so that the first thing that came to my mind when you were telling the story was this terminology, cultural intelligence, right? So obviously that didn't happen in this case, right? Actually, both cases, because they both misunderstood each other. One thought it was a joke. One knew he was joking. One didn't think that was a joke. So um, there was definitely a lack of intelligence around that, right? So how do you, the answer is actually easy if you theoretically is how do you stop this from happening is just becoming more intelligent, right? About this, right? So how do you do that? You get on the ground, right? This is this situation where you have to understand that how things are um how things are perceived in different countries, right? In different situations. So let me give you something that's a very simple for especially for people who are US centric, right? I Doug, have you ever spent any time in Hawaii
Yes.
for business? So I used to go to Hawaii every 6 to 8 weeks because it was our number one market, and we were there. So there everyone kind of knows the dress, right? So they kind of know that you that you're not wearing a tie and a suit and tie when you go into Hawaii. When you also, if you are there, you also know that you're not aggressively closing a customer in Hawaii, right? Right? Just you're not, right? There's a little bit, there's a little different strategy nuance when you're going in. But I've seen many, and I've seen people walk into situations and they are very, very aggressive to this, to their customers, to the people that they're talking to. And it's a complete turnoff, and it's insulting to that customer. And because they didn't take time to understand the culture, they were defeated immediately and not want to be let back in. And so, some people will understand where everyone's wearing these shirts and I'm wearing a tie, and they don't get it. They still don't get it. They don't understand the different culture. So for me, it's simply as just getting on the ground, talking to people, and really having an understanding that all these areas are different. The other thing to stay away from, Doug, is humor on or perceived humor on text, WhatsApp, all these different things, because as you know, things like that do not translate well even in one's own country, because you don't understand the context of the statement. It doesn't matter if you put emojis or whatever, you still don't understand that. So that's, to me, that's the first thing. I, how do you resolve that is really by just, I think what you did, Doug, is talking to both parties, understanding that it is a miscommunication, and here's what did you hearing from most parties. The important thing is to talk to everybody. It's just to not, don't form an opinion until you talk to everybody. I've seen a lot of things go south when somebody tells you a story, and then before you get the other side, you've already come to a conclusion. So hear every side and everybody involved, then you can come to a conclusion of how to communicate back to those people. And then if it's appropriate, if it's a team, bring them together, right? And talk about, hey, this is our steps we're going to do moving forward so this doesn't happen again. If it's this situation, I think it's just a matter of talking to each of them individually and saying, hey, this is how I'd help resolve this and move on from there. So I'd love to hear any other comments about that, from Charles or Michael or anybody else. I've seen some stuff in the text, so anybody else want to comment on that'd be great.
Feel feel free to do that. The end result of that particular one for me was only partially satisfying. The person in Peru heard kind of my explanation of what I understood, and then also transferred the apology over to him. And he was more like, well, okay, but I still kind of feel like that was bad. And I agree, it was bad. It was not good. And I told him that. The other guy was finally at some point said, oh, okay, I get it, and I apologize. And he apologized, and I transferred that over. I didn't connect the two of them yet because they're not really working together. And now
Yeah.
that they're disconnected on LinkedIn, it's like, what do you do next? Ultimately, the other fellow who made the joke is someone that I work with on a regular basis, and so how I process it with him going forward, I don't exactly know how that's going to transpire. I will say that he did end up, after all of that, putting a very positive comments about me in a WhatsApp group, explaining, how Doug is this, like super guru, global guru. Because so I felt like that was a realization on his part that this was something that was new to him. He wouldn't have imagined that by saying something like this to someone in another country that it would have that impact. And there was some realization on his part that there's probably something he needs to do differently in the future. So at least that's my positive take. Maybe
Well,
unrealistic, but and
I
I don't
think
know what to do next. Has
I think
anybody else have
Michael.
had this experience or gone through this?
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, Catherine's got an amazing question. So I don't know if you want to go to Catherine's question first, or
Sure, sure. Go
yeah,
ahead,
I think
Catherine.
I'd rather go to her question first because I've just read it and I think it's incredibly pertinent.
What
Thank
have you?
you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I was First of all, thank you for putting this together. It's amazing. Very needed. So I was concerned about a behavior that I saw in some leadership teams, and my concern was about going when I see the leadership walking in the borderline of it's still legal but has ethical concerns. And my question was about how to preserve the integrity on the team when the chain of command refuse to address these issues in order to avoid retaliation because the behavior or the attitude is in a leadership above the chain of command. So my question was your thoughts about how to address these ethic issues that's still not illegal but are being ethically debated, and both in behavior and talks at the highest level of leadership. And when the chain of command just refuse to address it just to avoid retaliation, but we want to preserve the trust of the team that we are not letting this behavior go. We are not on addressing it.
Thank you. Catherine, tell us a little bit more about your situation. What's your company and where are you?
Oh, I work in Inter-American Defense College. It's in Washington, D.C. We are an institution that educate senior leaderships from the entire Americas. I work with conflict analysis and responses course. I lead that course. It's a more practitioners front, but what I have seen as an institution, and I have recollect the concerns of the leaderships on their institution back home, what they see as most challenging engagement with their leadership when the leadership is not ethical, and they have issues to address that because it's not crossing the legality, but it's weakening the trust in the institution and is weakening the trust of the team, and of course affecting the performance.
Great. Thank you very much. How would you like to respond, Rutherford?
So you just said something, and I was thinking of this, and so the most important thing to talk to them about is trust of the team and performance of the team. If it at the end of the day, that's what they probably will listen to the most. If the downstream effects of their behavior or is going to impact performance, they have a greater chance or opportunity to change their mind and change versus they think it's just whatever. It's not a big deal. It's similar to what Doug was talking about with the two people on WhatsApp. It is you can talk to them about trust. And as we know, you can't go far without trust, right? You can go for a short period of time without trust, but you can't go far. You can't go long, and you can't be as profitable as possible without the trust of everybody on your team. So for me, the most important thing is trust. Now, it sounds like you've had conversations with them and they haven't listened, or they refuse to address the ethical tightrope that this is on right now. I would this is a difficult situation because I have to hear a lot more information to give you good sound talking points or advice. But for me, I'll just tell you personally, my dad said to me a long time ago, he said, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything, right? And there's different things that are bright lines for me. I'm not going to do anything that's not ethical. I'm not going to do anything that's illegal. So it's just a matter of what you, your team is willing to stand for. I'm not trying to tell you anything to get you in trouble or things, but I need to know a lot more about the situation before I could even answer it in a way I think would be meaningful for you. If Michael, do you want to take a stab?
Of course, if you want me to. What I'd like to do is to try and combine your previous point where you talk about intercultural intelligence and marry it up with the question that's just been asked, Catherine, because I've had that question. What do you do when people above you don't do the right thing? You know, the first thing is my father, like you, Rutherford, was very formative for me. And he said, in terms of culture, it's the way we do things here. But I heard a really good explanation that expanded on that for global use, which was culture is how we think, it's how we act, and it's how we interact. And I'd say, like you were saying, until you know how people think, how they're going to act, and how you can interact with those people, you have to be very careful. You know, going back to Doug's example, don't make a joke if you don't know how it's going to be interpreted. So I think that's very helpful. I would recommend, as well as John C. Maxwell, this book, 7 Pillars of Servant Leadership. Absolutely amazing. We've actually been teaching conflict resolution today. And to keep it simple, to go back to Catherine's question, some people don't care about relationships, they just want results, right? And that's where you have to think about your ethical standards. And in my experience, when you deal with people who don't particularly care about you and don't share your values and your relationship or want to build a relationship or do the right thing, then like Rutherford said, you speak to them about results. You know, as Bob Proctor, when he was a young man and he was very aggressive and didn't care about personal development, he went to a speaker and the speaker was like, you got to be really positive, help people. And young Bob Proctor said, I think you're terrible. And the guy said, well, my way's working for me. How's your way working for you? And of course it wasn't. So like Rutherford said, you go to the results, stay calm, be very clear, be very concise. You know, to use the language of this, let's talk about results from relationships on a graph. Yeah. They're playing the hawk. Don't play the ostrich. Don't be scared by these people and don't be intimidated by these people ever, because then they'll prey on that, you know? And then the final thing I've just got prepared is a guy called Stephen Cartman in the 60s talked about the drama triangle. And I've seen this a lot. You see this a lot in social media: victim, rescuer, and persecutor, you know? So someone experiences conflict, has a bad experience, they go into victim mode. Or then they become the persecutor, or they have a go at somebody else jumps in to rescue them. That's not what leaders should do. So a guy called David Emerald created a different triangle called the empowerment triangle, which is what Rutherford's talking about today, which is create solutions going forward. Don't play the victim, don't play the rescuer, don't play the persecutor. You can create improvements, you can coach people, and you can challenge them. But again, you have to use that in relation to the context. But personally, I think the one that we all have to watch out for is don't jump on and try and be the rescuer, which is what Rutherford just successfully avoided then. Did you hear when he said, I can't give you an answer because I don't know enough information? That's fantastic, because otherwise, how can you diagnose a good solution? So very smart whether you realize that or not, you know?
Yeah. So listen, that's just, it goes back to the previous question, statement I made. You have to understand every side. You gotta really dig in deep. You gotta find out the why behind why they're doing this, and if it's just money, if it's so everyone's got a motive. There's something behind what they said, why they said it, and the manner they say it. And so you have to interrogate all of those things to come up with a really, really good way to move forward.
Charles, did you have something to add, please?
Well, thank you for asking me to add something, and I've been listening carefully. I love all the comments. I love the pacing. You're just a wonderful person to listen to, Rutherford. You have a really nice way of speaking and being. You too, Michael, and of course, Doug always. The only thing I can offer is I've been in similar situations where when you're dealing with someone above you, maybe it's one level or two, they may even be the owner of the business or the enterprise or the institution. I think sometimes avoiding a direct path can sometimes work. I mean, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But in this case, my example would be an indirect path. find someone that person you want to contribute to listens to. Like, who does that person respect and why? And it could be they only respect them because they have more money than them or more influence or more power. But it's kind of like you have to find two qualities in that person they respect. It can't just be a mirror of them because you're not going to get anywhere. So if for example, the person I respect is Michael Quigley, and he shares some of my, not so pleasant values, let's say. But on the other hand, he has a part of him that is people focused, cares. He cares about something. He has some stake. Then I would go to him first. And rather than say, hey, Michael, go tell your friend, your partner, the boss that he's doing something bad, ask for coaching. Here's a situation, and the best thing is to be factual, because I think the moment you put in an interpretation, you get into trouble. It's kind of like, this happened, he or she said this, and I was there. And the reason I'm bringing this to you is because I believe there's going to be a consequence that's not going to be in your, it's not going to be in your best interest. It's not going to be in the boss's best interest. It's not going to be in the company's best interest. And kind of, I've said a lot, so I would say less is more, but go to someone else that this other person trusts, represent the case in a, take away the charge, the electricity associated with it, kind of like, what's the word that hostage negotiators use? I forgot what it is. They de-escalate, I think.
Yeah.
Like, de-escalate the situation so it doesn't come across as you're already biased because you're upset about it. And that takes a lot, but it's just one pathway, right? I just think that I've used that before and it's worked for me, at least.
Charles, let me just double down on your calmness. And when you go at this, Catherine, that de-escalating and calm and thoughtful manner will go a longer way. Because if you are going in from if you're metaphorically, hair's on fire, you're mad, it's not going to have the same results. If you're thoughtful in there, and from the way you go in, and you, like Charles said, everything is factual, it's true. It becomes an easier way for that person to understand you're serious, and going to an adjacent party that they respect is also a spectacular strategy in the situation. Hopefully there's somebody like that you can go to, right?
Yeah.
Bishan, thank you for your answer in the chat area as well. Very, very thoughtful.
Doug, can I just comment?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Thank you, Khalid. Please go ahead.
Yeah, this is a great discussion, and it's a very important discussion. As far as your cultural understanding, etc., is concerned, as the lady pointed out earlier, sometimes it is a fault of the leadership that they do not realize the importance of how to handle different workers from their employees from different cultures. I'll give you a simple example. Here in Central Florida, for example, we have leaders coming in, corporate leaders coming in from South America to take over acquisitions of companies, etc., and therefore they have to deal with the local employees. Now, here, for example, in a smaller community, it is what I call a democratic leadership style that works compared to a lot of other countries in South America, where it is what I call an authoritarian leadership. And I've seen many leaders fail here when they've acquired businesses simply because they do not understand the type of cultural leadership that is required here compared to the leadership style in their own country. So it is very important that we understand different culture. For example, here in Orlando, we have national from 200 different countries residing here in Central Florida. Now, if you do not understand, say, the culture of one community, for example, 10% of the population here in Central Florida is Asian Americans, and you are trying to do business and make whatever your goals are, achieve those goals, whether it's profitability or sales. If you are unable to understand and interact with that 10% of the population, you are missing out on 10% of your potential clients, etc. So as pointed earlier, it is when we talk about understanding cultures, it is I think people overlook the fact that it is mentally interaction as well as physical interaction.
Great points. Thank you very much. You bring up inclusivity and involving others. I had an eventful day yesterday, a lot of different conversations. And another one was an Hispanic woman who was looking for help in her business, a member of Global Chamber, and I started to say, oh, how about this person? How about that person? And each one of them turned out to be a male, Hispanic male, and I got the lowdown on each one. And it reminded me of something that I feel not very good about, and I've never articulated it until she and I talked about it, is kind of the bro mentality of, I think men do this generally, but for whatever reason, Hispanic men in leadership, or certainly some of the ones that I know in some cities, kind of collect together and they are out for themselves and not so much, certainly not women. And so I felt her pain, and she articulated the pain much better than I can do. How does a leader work through inclusivity with issues like this that are out there? There's old stereotypes about men and women and their roles and how they and men, oftentimes in leadership, have the antiquated ideas in their head. They're the ones that they've progressed because they've suppressed women largely, and now they're in leadership or in some level of leadership, and yet they're a barrier. So whether it's an organization or whether it's just another organization, how does a leader deal with that? Any thoughts? Hopefully I explained that well enough. I feel like I may not have.
So let me start. Let me think about this. So I think there's a book by Simon Sinek called "Leaders Eat Last," right? Is that? I think that's by Simon Sinek. So I think about that at the same time. So when somebody's having a meeting or somebody's getting information, what to me is everybody else needs to speak and speak wholly, right? And to give their point of view. If you want inclusion from others, you have to listen intently. If you remember, Doug, the last time I talked about listening is like the biggest skill in leadership, the most important skill, and it's triple that when you're talking from a global scale with all different countries, cultures, things like that. So you have to make sure that everybody has their say, their word, their point of view, and it's listened to. And as the overall leader, they speak last. And because you want to truthfully hear from males, females, young, old, whatever ethnicity, it doesn't matter, but you need to listen to everybody, right? And then take it in, and then importantly, right? This is the second part. First of all, you have to listen, right? For the inclusive. Then you have to take an idea. You have to take one or two or a composite of some ideas to form a final decision. Okay. What you cannot do, which this happened to me in my last role, when the leader came in already with his mind made up. And the three of us were on the three other of us were on four of us were on the phone, a Zoom call, and we knew that it didn't matter what we said. He already made his mind up. It didn't matter. So you want to be, if you want to be inclusive, and you want to be in a way that you grow this culture of trust, right? You have to listen to everybody's opinion, then take at least one or a combination, and then come up with a final answer for that. To me, that's the best way to get this thing moving forward. You just can't come in with an idea already baked. The cake is baked. You don't have, there's nothing else. It's done. And now you come and ask me how to solve the problem. You already know what you want to do, but you're forcing this meeting to have this performative act of getting my opinion when you already have an answer. That's the part of the leadership that I've seen. I'm sure many others have seen this and felt this, and the people just want to be listened to. People want to be heard. One of the first things you do as great leaders is giving people an opportunity to be listened to. Have you guys ever noticed when great leaders change companies, what's the first thing they do? They go on a listening tour. And they actually do listen. They do listen. They don't talk. They listen. They try to find out, because when they get hired as a CEO by the board might have 40-60% of the answers, but they don't have 100, because the board hasn't talked to the people on the ground. The board hasn't talked to the people in manufacturing. The board hasn't talked to the number one or two best customers. If the new CEO comes in and does that, talks to all those parties, that's inclusivity, right? Mm-hmm. Then they can come up with an answer, because they've talked to every different faction of the organism, so they can now make great decisions as leaders.
Brilliant. We only have about 10 minutes left. There's so much here. Michael, you want to take a next shot at it too?
Sure.
Well, which part of this would you like to tackle?
Women and men. So my background before I ran a business was I was a primary school teacher. So I worked primarily with a lot of women. I was in a minority. And there was this false idea that boys learn better from men. And I challenged that, and I said, not at all. I said, but the world has both, so they need to see both, you know? And so working in the business world now, it's a lot more balanced for me. But I just want to pick up on what Rutherford said. When you listen to people, your intentions of your listening are very, very important. Take their concerns incredibly seriously and let them know with your intent and the way you listen that something that might be a small thing for you is very, very important to them, and therefore it's important to you. If people feel their needs are unmet and they're not listened to, you've lost them. You've lost their heart. You've lost their mind. One thing I think people need to be very aware of and very careful with is to promise outcomes that are necessarily in your ability. For example, the difference between opportunity of outcome and opportunity of equal opportunity and equality outcome. Yeah. So for example, 4 billion women in the world, 4 billion men, roughly, something like that. But recognizing where there are disparities, and there are always going to be disparities. Like some people like sports, some people don't, you know. And there's a really good comment in the chat that says it's like the patient who tells the doctor how to cure them. It's never for the leader, like Rutherford said, to impose on us. Well, here's what I need to think. Here's what you need to do based on me listening to you for 10 minutes. It's actually like Charles was quoting Chris Voss, the hostage negotiator from New York. One of his best opening calibrated questions, things like, what are you up against here? You know, not what are you up against as a woman, what are you up, no. Don't put your words in it. What are you up against here? And listen. And then the brilliant one he says next is, what would an ideal solution look like for you? And let them talk, you know. And if it's ridiculous, he says, how am I supposed to provide that? You know, like they want $10 million within an hour. But you're casting your net very wide. And one last thing I'd like to add is when you're dealing with somebody who's not like you, from a different country, different experience, like most people really are, if we're honest, there's you and 8 billion other people. You don't know them and their experience. So be interested. You know, be really, really interested. I love doing international business. I've learned so much. Stay humble, and you'll give off that vibe of this person's here to help me move forward. And then you've got them, you know, and that's all you need. So hopefully that is relevant to men and women, because I think that's a conversation that sometimes, like Doug's just said, we don't feel qualified to talk about. You don't need a degree. You just need some intention, an open mind, and an open heart, and willing to listen to people, especially if they disagree with you. So hopefully that helps. Thank you.
Like Khalid or Charles, anything to add?
No, thanks. I can't beat what's been said. That's really, really insightful.
I agree. Really brilliant. Khalid, you work just so amazingly across so many different cultures. Congratulations on your work. You've got to be amazing at it because
Okay. Well, I just to follow up on the point from the earlier presentation, and that was how do you solve the problem? I have in my company, I have my agent from 22 different countries, and they speak 24 different languages. And to me, they're under. I mean, because they understand their own culture, and I try and understand their culture, but the problems that they bring and the solutions that they provide for their own problems, I cannot get there. So that is one way to solve it, is to have people working for you from those. I'll give you a simple example. This is going back last year. I have a Chinese real estate agent in my company. She comes in on a Friday to my office and she says, Khalid, I have a client, I have a closing coming up on Tuesday. And I asked the client to provide me with, Chinese client to provide me with proof of funds to make sure that they have the money. Well, she turns up in my place with a suitcase full of cash as proof of she has the money. Of course, that's not going to work here. So, well, I have a solution to that problem. I said, and what is the solution? I'm going to go to another friend of mine, and I'm going to ask her to give my friend a loan and give a cashier's check so she can do the closing, and we'll solve the problem afterwards. You understand how I did not even think of a solution to a problem like that, and yet. That is, I don't, I mean, I try and understand, and I've lived and worked in 10 countries around the globe, Africa, Asia, Europe, etc. But sometimes, you know, we can't understand 100% of the culture, right? It's time consuming, etc. I mean, you know, I had a lot of organizations here, like the Brazilian Chamber, etc. But sometimes the solution that they provide to a problem they come up with, I cannot think. So that's my solution, is to have them in your company so they can provide the solution to their problems.
such power in that.
Yes.
We're at the end of the hour. Rutherford, could you make some closing comments, please?
No, the only closing comments, listen, great. I thought it was a great conversation, Catherine. Thank you for the question. Got me to think about that because I haven't had that situation as dramatically as you outlined. I think it really helped, and I love this community as far as the leadership we have in the community. But you know, Khalid, Charles, Michael and everybody else on the phone that I know has a lot of leadership experience. It's great to come together on a call like this to share, to help grow, and to help each of us get better. And one thing that's important here, like we talk about leadership, I talk about leadership, Michael talks about leadership, Charles. We're all growing. Like we don't. This is not like a solving. We end game. We reached we reached Mount Everest. No, we are growing. We're learning. There's so many situations that we've been in. I mean, I will say, I've told people this. I have been in so many situations, but I've also not been in so many situations. Even though I spent 35 years, with corporate America, I'm sure there's probably 20 situations that I would need to really, really think about that never last. And so having calls like this, having the brain power that it is on Global Chamber is really, really awesome. So thank you, Doug, for putting this together.
Thank you. Catch us in an hour with Blaine Bartlett. Thanks, Rutherford. You're amazing. And we'll have another session like this next month. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Great
guys.
conversations.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye
Thanks,
bye.
Khalid.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
It was amazing. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Paula.